The Aethelgard had been falling through the silent, black void between galaxies for 8 months. Out here, billions of light-years from the nearest star system. Space isn't just dark, it's absolute. There is no background radiation to hum in the receivers, no cosmic dust to scatter light, no stray radio signals from dead civilization. There is only the ship, its 3-person crew, and a vacuum so profound it feels like a physical weight pressing against the hull. The ship was a long-range reconnaissance vessel, built like a brutalist concrete needle designed to pierce the nothingness. Its interior was a claustrophobic labyrinth of exposed conduits, hum-stabilized plating, and the sterile smell of recycled oxygen and ozone. For months, the only sound was the monotonous, reassuring thrum of the Alcobia drive housing, a deep, subaudible vibration that the crew felt in their teeth rather than heard. Then the scratching started. Shift 142. The first resonance. Engineer Marcus was alone during the quiet hours of the beta shift, performing a routine thermal fluid flush in the maintenance crawlways of Deck 4. The crawlways were tight, requiring him to slide on his back beneath the heavy primary conduits. It was peaceful, in a way. Then came the sound. Screerage. Marcus froze. His wrench hovered centimeters from a coolant valve. The sound was thin, sharp, and dry like a brittle fingernail dragging across frosted glass. He held his breath, listening over the rush of his own pulse. The hull of the Aethelgard was a marvel of defensive engineering. 4 feet of solid, reinforced titanium matrix alloy, insulated by an active vacuum gap and a dense layer of shock-absorbing aerogel. Sound requires a medium to travel. For a sound to be heard inside the atmospheric cabin, it had to originate from something, physically striking or vibrating the outermost layer of the ship with immense force. Scritch, scritch, slide. It moved. It wasn't a localized vibration. Marcus watched in mounting disbelief as a thin line of condensation on the overhead bulkhead parted, a tiny track clearing through the moisture, as if something on the other side of the metal was tracing a finger along the beam. He scrambled backward out of the crawlway, scraping his shoulder against a bracket, and hit his comms patch. "Commander," Marcus said, his voice tight, betraying the sudden spike of adrenaline. "Are we passing through a micrometeoroid swarm? I'm getting severe acoustic anomalies on Deck 4. It feels localized." Commander Vane's voice crackled back through his earpiece, heavy with the gravel of forced sleep. "The sensor grid is completely clear, Marcus. We're in the intergalactic void. There isn't a rogue atom of hydrogen for 3 parsecs in any direction. Check the environmental fans. You're probably hearing a bearing slipping." "It's not a bearing, Commander," Marcus whispered, pressing his palm flat against the vibrating bulkhead. The metal felt ice-cold, colder than it should have been. "It's moving against the friction of the ship." Shift 143. The acoustic anomaly. By the following shift, the anomaly could no longer be dismissed as engineering paranoia. It had migrated from the underbelly of Deck 4, crawling upward along the exterior spine of the ship toward the habitation module. The 3 crew members gathered on the bridge, a semicircular command deck dominated by a massive, reinforced synthetic quartz viewport. Outside, the view was a terrifying, uniform sheet of black. Not a single star was visible to the naked eye. The galaxies were too distant. Their light faint smudges only the digital telescope arrays could detect. They were truly alone. "It's a frequency leak, Dr. Harris," the ship's linguist and data analyst insisted. She was pale, her fingers flying across her monitors, pulling up waterfall plots of the ship's internal audio sensors. The long-range subspace comes picking up quantum static from the void. The hull is acting as a giant diaphragm, translating electromagnetic noise into structural vibration. Look at the waveform. She displayed a graphic on the main console. The sound waves were jagged, chaotic spikes. Static doesn't pause when you talk to it, Marcus said flatly. He was sitting on the edge of a console, eyes fixed on the ceiling. What do you mean, Marcus? Commander Vane asked, her uniform immaculate, despite the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. It waits, Marcus said. When the main engines cycle, it stops. When we talk loudly in the corridors, it quietens down. It's modulating. To prove his point, Marcus walked over to the primary structural pillar on the bridger pillar, tied directly into the external keel. He raised a heavy, mechanical flashlight and struck the metal twice. Thud. Thud. The bridge fell into an oppressive silence. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic clicking of Harris's cooling fans. 1 second passed. 2, 3. From the exact spot on the other side of the structural pillar, through 4 feet of insulated shielding, came the reply. Thud. Thud. Harris gasped, drawing her legs up into her command chair. Then came a new sound. A wet, heavy sliding noise, as if something massive, soft, and impossibly dense was dragging itself across the outer surface of the quartz viewport. They all whipped their heads toward the window. The emergency spotlights mounted on the hull were active, throwing beams of high-intensity white light into the vacuum. The light illuminated nothing. No shapes, no limbs, no shadows. The vacuum was empty, yet, right before their eyes, a faint, frosted film appeared on the outside of the quartz, spreading in a starburst pattern, mimicking the exact shape of a human handprint, only 5 times too large. Shift 145. The mimicry. The psychological degradation of the crew happened rapidly. They stopped returning to their private quarters, choosing instead to sleep on the bridge floor, taking turns watching the bulkheads. The vacuum outside had always been a passive enemy, a hostile environment of zero pressure and absolute zero temperature. Now it felt predatory. The entity, whatever it was, had begun to catalogue them. During the 3rd night of the haunting, Dr. Harris woke with a jolt from a fitful doze. The bridge was bathed in the dim amber glow of the night cycle arrays. Vane was at the helm, staring blankly into the black. Marcus was asleep near the airlock. From the ventilation duct directly above Harris's head, a sound emerged. It was faint, garbled by a strange, metallic echo, but entirely recognizable. It was her own voice. Double quotes, ... The long-range subspace comes are picking up quantum static. The duct whispered. The tone was an exact replica of Harris's voice from the previous day, but the cadence was horrifyingly wrong. The vowels were stretched out like pulled taffy. The consonants clipped and mechanical. It sounded like a corpse trying to operate a text-to-speech program. Help me. It's cold. Marcus, open the hatch. It's cold, Commander. Harris choked out, her voice a dry sob. Vane already had her sidearm drawn, her knuckles white as she aimed it uselessly at the ceiling. I hear it. Marcus, wake up. Marcus scrambled to his feet, pulling a portable scanner from his belt. Sensors are showing 0 external mass. There is nothing on the hull. Hull integrity is at 100%. 100%. 100%. Open the hatch. The hull groaned, the voice shifting from Harris's frantic tone to a perfect, chilling imitation of Marcus's deep baritone. It was learning their inflections, testing the weight of their words against the metal. "It's not trying to get in," Harris whispered, horror dawning on her as she looked at the waterfall plots on her screen. The jagged lines of static had smoothed out. They were now perfectly forming the shapes of human speech patterns. "It's not an animal. It's a mirror. Space is a mirror, and it's looking back at us." Suddenly, the vocalization stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, viscous, and terrifying. Then the ship began to scream. Shift 146. Structural failure. It wasn't a voice this time. It was the sound of structural agony. A terrifying, deafening screech echoed through the ship as the titanium matrix alloy began to groan under immense, localized pressure. It sounded like a submarine hull collapsing in the deepest trenches of Earth. Creak. Whole pressure drop in the vacuum gap. Marcus yelled over the din, alarms finally beginning to blare in flashing crimson strobes. "Something is compressing the secondary plating. It's squeezing us. Engage the emergency thrusters. Break the drift," Vane shouted, slumming her hands onto the propulsion overrides. The ship's chemical maneuvering thrusters fired, throwing a violent jolt through the vessel. For a moment the scratching stopped. The crew held their breath, thinking they had shaken it off, that the violent acceleration had left the entity behind in the void. But the relief lasted only a heartbeat. The sound returned, not from one localized spot, but from everywhere at once. It was a synchronized, frantic scratching on every square inch of the Aethelgard's exterior. Thousands of invisible fingers, claws, or tendrils tearing at the metal, searching for a seam, a weakness, a flaw in the engineering. From the ceiling of the bridge, the heavy, industrial rivets began to pop. They shot out of their sockets like bullets, ricocheting off the consoles with deafening clangs. The thick structural alloy of the ceiling began to bow inward, slowly reshaping itself. The crew watched in absolute, paralyzed horror as the solid metal roof deformed, taking the shape of three distinct, massive figures pressing down from the outside, grotesque, elongated human silhouettes molding themselves out of the ceiling, reaching down toward them. The quartz viewport began to a spider web with millions of tiny micro-fractures. The blackness of the void seeped through the cracks, not as a rushing vacuum, but as a slow, creeping ink that extinguished the emergency lights wherever it touched. As the structural integrity finally collapsed, and the air began to hiss out into the absolute nothingness, the last recording on the ship's black box didn't capture the sound of an explosion. It captured a chorus. It was the voices of Vane, Marcus, and Harris, perfectly synchronized, laughing and screaming in a flawless, beautiful, and utterly soulless harmony, singing themselves into the dark. Thanks for watching.